Welcome, folks, to this week's edition of Tech Sales Advice. We are a minute or two late, so hopefully we've actually given our audience a chance to join us. I am, of course, your host, Chris White. This is the LinkedIn Live program for technical sales professionals and technical sales leaders. And let me emphasize, these are live conversations, folks, by design, unscripted, unrehearsed, and unpredictable. And I actually have a returning guest to the show, Miss Alara Vural. She's based in the UK. In fact, I think she just moved. And she is a messaging architect. She's a consultant that works with companies to find their roar, as she likes to say. And Alara, I think it says on your LinkedIn profile, helping companies develop messaging that is impossible to misunderstand and irresistible to act on. Do I have that correct?
You've got it correct. That was
fantastic.
That was the most amazing intro.
Fantastic. Well, Alara, really nice to see you again. Honestly, I think, has it been a year? It may even have been a year and a half since I think 2020 is when you were last on this little show. So welcome back. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, Chris. It's great to be back. It's great to reconnect with you. And yeah, like you mentioned, literally about an hour ago, we've moved into our new house. So currently, I'm in a bit of a makeshift office. But yeah, no, it's really exciting.
I'm flattered that you've joined us on such short notice, and take a minute, share with our friends. Where is it that you live now?
So I live in Cornwall, which is kind of the southwest part of the UK, far southwest corner, and it is a beautiful part of the UK. Amazing beaches, lots of nature, quite quiet part of the UK. Exactly what we're looking for. So we've been waiting a long time to make this move. So here we are. We're in our new home and ready to make it homey, make it our
fantastic. Home. Well, good for you. Well, let's talk messaging. I think a lot of organizations struggle with messaging in such a way that's not confusing. As you well know, I work with a lot of pre-sales professionals, sales engineers, even just technical sellers. And oftentimes we in this profession, we struggle with talking about our solutions and our products in a way that makes sense to customers. And to use your term, is irresistible. It's so easy for us to just talk about our products in the context of how we understand them. So let's break this down a little bit. First of all, let's start with some of the challenges and some of the problems you see out there. Why is this such a big problem for so many sales professionals, so many organizations?
Yeah. So, I was laughing while you were saying that, because the more I'm in this work of message architecting, yes, I work with businesses, but the more I actually realize it is in all parts of our life. Like even kind of in conversations that I'm having with my husband, like the other day, he was telling me about what he was doing at work. Like he's an aerospace engineer, so lots of technicalities going on in his work. And I'm really interested. I was like, how did your day go? What were you doing? And then he's like, oh, we were fixing this XBB part of the, I was just like, and I find that actually messaging is not even just a sales tool. It is a fundamental ingredient of effective communication. And without communication, it doesn't matter how amazing your product is, it's not going to sell, right? So that is the biggest challenge. That is the biggest challenge when it comes to messaging, is the focus is on what you're selling, rather, the actual technicalities, the product, what's in the box, rather than making it impossible to misunderstand and irresistible to act on, right? I often say I turn underwhelming messages into impactful ones. And the reason I use impactful rather than clear or compelling is because impact is a combination of actually a variety of different things. It's a combination of clarity, it's a combination of emotional pull, and also, having a bit of a story, having a bit of a flow. So, the biggest challenge when it comes to influencing people to act is positioning it in a way that makes it desirable. And the biggest challenge when it comes to doing that is it's either confusing, it either is boring, it doesn't speak to the emotions, or it just doesn't have a flow, a story that positions the audience as the hero. It's kind of a very selfish flow. It's like me, I'm amazing, watch me. And that story doesn't seem to land so well with people. So yeah, if I was to summarize the 3 biggest challenges I see when it comes to messaging, it usually comes down to that. Logical clarity, whether that's too kind of in the weeds or too big picture, too generic. Both of them are at its core a problem that stems from being too confusing. There's something that doesn't add up logically. Or the second one is emotional disconnect, like it's just too dry. It's just, I work with a lot of companies that when I talk about this part, the emotional part, they're like, yeah, but our audience isn't very emotional. Like we work in a very technical industry. So I'm like, you are selling to humans, no matter how technical what you're selling is. At the end of the day, it is a human that needs to sign the check or say, okay, let me go to my decision maker. And humans biologically work by making decisions based on their feelings first and then backing it up with logic. So if you find yourself saying to yourself, I'm not a very emotional person, my audience is a very emotional person, just nip that in the bud, please.
People buy from people. Period. I mean, I've been saying this for years. So, wow, Alara, you said a lot in that little response there. And I mean, I could almost push pause and call it a day, but we're gonna unpack this a little bit further. First of all, you used the term underwhelming, and it's so true. I think there are so many underwhelming messages and messaging out there that just fails to land. So when you begin to work with a client, where do you start? What's the first thing you do to sort of help them find their roar and find those messages that are going to resonate with the people that they're calling on?
Yeah. So there's 3 fundamental parts to my process. So the first part is the emotional connection part. This is the part where so even though earlier I was saying it needs to connect logically, it needs to connect emotionally, and then you need to tell a story. Actually, we start off by articulating the emotional connection part, right? So what I mean by that is there are a lot of ways to connect emotionally. I could connect emotionally by blackmailing you, right? That would make you feel something. But the real emotions that get people to not only just impulsively buy from you, if I blackmailed you, said buy from me, otherwise, I'll do something horrible, then you're probably going to buy. But will you come back willingly? And will you tell all your friends and family about it? Is it a sustainable emotional connection? Probably not.
Probably not.
So when I say emotional connection, I'm talking about making people feel like they know you and they're buying into something bigger than just a product, right? They're buying into something, a movement, a difference that you're making in the world. And that doesn't mean that your business has to be the next kind of I'm going to save the world business, right? But no matter what business you have, even if you think it's the most commoditized thing, you are fundamentally selling a feeling, right? And I love your shovel analogy, and I've seen it over and over again, like other people quoting it and tagging you back, because that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? You are selling a feeling. So there's 2 ways of looking at this, right? So let's say you sell a shovel. You could try to reverse engineer, like what is the feeling that people buy when they buy a shovel? You could kind of try to do market research and speak to people, which is great. It's one aspect of it, right? It's one aspect of understanding what is the feeling. It's almost like you're discovering what the feeling they're selling is. But really, the more subtle but powerful emotion that you're selling that I think is worth discovering, which is what I do with my clients in that first session, is actually excavating their why. Their why is the feeling that made them start the business in the first place. Their why is the feeling that makes them decide to continue with this business, even though it would be a whole lot easier just to go work for someone else or whatever it is, right? There is a reason why business owners, salespeople, sales professionals are in the job that they're in and selling that particular product, right? And even if you find yourself saying, well, I just want to make money quickly and retire, there is a lot of ways of making money quickly and retiring, right? So what is it specifically about this work that you're in that makes you that makes you stay where you are. So essentially, that is the feeling that we're trying to really uncover, because when you can communicate that internal feeling rather than something external that you've just kind of discovered by, oh, what's the feeling that, you know, someone must be feeling when they buy a shovel. What, you know, when you actually excavate what the feeling that's driving you is that made you start the business in the first place, people buy into that feeling, right? So for example, the feeling that I feel, you know, the reason why I have the business that I have is because I feel so passionate about helping people connect to what I call this gold inside of them, this kind of unique value that only they can offer to the world, and then helping them spread it. Like, find your goal, spread it. Like, and I could do that many ways. I could do that through yoga teaching. I could do that through career coaching. And one of the ways I can do it is messaging. Right now, in the stage of life that I'm at, I want to do it through messaging because I feel like that's the most effective way that I can kind of make that happen. But that's the feeling that I always try to communicate when I'm talking to my clients. You know, it's not, you don't just necessarily say it, I help you find your golden and spread it, but it's in the subtleties and how you in kind of saying, you know what, well done for how far you've got. Like, I often find myself just appreciating my clients for how far they've got. That is one way of communicating my why, because I value that. I really value how much they've listened to their intuition, started their business, or, you know, in the case of a lot of people that would be listening to this live, you know, actually going out and putting their all into their sales career. So it's when you know what that why is for yourself, you can weave it into those little interactions, whether it's verbal, whether it's your actual website messaging, but you can weave it in throughout your core message, if that makes sense. So I know that was a little bit of a long answer for your question, but that is essentially what we untangle in the first part of the process, is articulating their why. And if you're interested, happy to talk about how I do that, but I'll stop there for a moment.
Well, and I do want to go deeper into that, but I'm going to paraphrase just for a minute, because I think you said a couple of really important things. And the first thing that you said that really resonated with me is this notion that we sell a feeling, right? And this ties to the very first part of the conversation, which is, look, people buy from people, and people do make purchase decisions emotionally. By the way, they make purchase decisions emotionally, and they justify with logic, right? But what I sort of mined out of that response was that as someone who has started a business, we need to reflect on the feeling that drove us to start the business, right? And our why, and that feeling is what others are going to buy into. Right? Like, that's really, so people are going to buy your service, your solution, your platform, in my case, my training, in large part for the same reason that you decided to create the business to begin with, right? So that needs to become part of the message and part of the story. And I absolutely love it. In fact, and by the way, as you were speaking, it got me thinking, you know, what is the reason, and what is the feeling that I'm selling, right? And I think, like, to a certain degree, for example, confidence is one of the things that I sell, right? I want people to go out in the field feeling confident that they can engage with any client. By the way, Alara, let me just push our own pause button here. Brian Lewis has become a friend. He runs home run pre-sales, and he's tuning in to today's conversation. Brian, it's good to see you. And folks, we don't see who's out there. So if any of you care to chime in and say hello like Brian has, please do so. Love to hear you. And by all means, if you have any questions for Alara or myself, please ask. In fact, Brian, he started pre-sale, home run pre-sales, and I sort of have a sense for his why, but I imagine his wheels are spinning a little bit. So take us a step further, Alara. The first thing you're really looking for is to help, whether it's business owners or maybe it's sales leaders. First of all, understand that you're selling a feeling, and we really need to connect with that feeling that we were seeking maybe when we started the business, and what the why is. So you said that you will talk a little bit about the process. What is the process, and what can people do maybe even on their own?
Yeah, absolutely. So while you were there talking about kind of reflecting on your why, I remember the why discovery session that we did with you, and I might not get it exactly right, but I remember something along the lines of making quick and sharp, impactful changes. Going in there, making a change, and kind of that being the pivot point almost. I might have paraphrased a little bit, but something along those lines. And I can see how you do that with your own work, in the way that your business works, but also the impact that has on your clients as well, the people that you work with through your book, because you're helping people have skills that is the pivot point for their career, for their business, right? For their I that's why I think, and I don't want to speak for you here, this is my experience kind of observing your work from the outside. That's why I think your book is such a game changer, because there's not that many books written in the sales engineering space, and the tips that you give are so you apply it and they work, and that's why it kind of propagates. It's almost like this kind of it's almost like you don't need to actively market it anymore, because people are like, look at this book, you should check this book out. So I think that's just from the years of connection that we've had, I can see that that's actually the feeling that I get from working with you, and I can imagine other people do as well.
Well, and it's a good point, and I think it's when people have those aha moments, right? So I think what I'd love to, and by the way, a few more people are chiming in, and we got to say hello. John Lindsay from North Carolina. Michelle Duffy is up in Minnesota. So Michelle and John, thanks for tuning in. It's good to see you. What are some of the aha moments that some of the sort of the repeatable or the common aha moments that your customers experience when they go through this process?
Yes, right. So the why discovery process is not something that you sit down and you're like, I wonder what my why is, even though that's kind of the first reaction when you hear a conversation like this. It actually isn't something that you logically just think about or kind of brainstorm. It's something that you need to observe out of your moments in your past that have shaped the person that you've become, right? And let me expand on that. I know that doesn't make sense immediately. The person that you've become, the worldview that you have that has led to you creating the business, or like as a sales engineer, you're kind of almost running like a little mini business as well.
For
a
sure.
sales professional, you're running your a little mini business on the side. So when I say business, I'm kind of I speak about that very widely. There are moments in your life that have shaped the person that you become, the beliefs that you have right now, and the worldview that you have that's led to you running your business the way that you run it now, and doing what you do now, right? So it's about actually observing what are those moments in our life that have been pivot points, right? Sometimes it's a big thing, like, I don't know, moving house, or having your kids, or meeting people, or deciding, actually, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go into this career. I want to do this. Sometimes it's little subtle moments, right? So it's a really good idea just to start off by listing moments, all these moments that you feel has been impactful in shaping the person that you've become. Are you still there? You just
I've got you. So keep rolling.
All right, cool. So a great way to start is listing all these moments in your life that you feel have shaped the person that you've become. So that could be having lunch with your grandma and something stood out to you because the way that she observed something that no one else had observed. Maybe observed kind of, today you're glowing a little bit more, and that made you feel, actually, the fact that she noticed that made me feel really loved. And maybe actually that theme of noticing differences, noticing subtleties, maybe that theme actually comes up in a few different stories as well. The first time you noticed it might have been with your grandma noticing that you're glowing today. Maybe the next time is when you spotted a talent on the street, and I'm very much making this narrative up, but what you'll find is, when you start to observe the moments that have been pivotal to shaping the person that you become, however big or small they are, you'll start to see themes pop up that are reoccurring. like, for example, noticing talent, or noticing differences, subtleties, or finding your inner gold, or connecting people. There's all sorts of themes that come up, but a really great place to start is list all these moments down. Write down, what about this moment stands out to me? Why, out of all the moments, did I write this one down? What about this moment do I think has been pivotal to shaping the person that I've become? And then what you can do is compare all the themes that you have, and essentially the reoccurring ones are your why, and then you just need to find a sentence way of saying it, bringing it all into a sentence, essentially. And a really good kind of framework to work with your why is blank, so that blank, right? So in the first blank, you put your contribution to help people find their gold, and the second blank is the impact that contribution has, that makes you want to make the contribution more, that makes you feel passionate about it. So to help people find their inner gold, so that they can we can live a more connected life. For me, it's about connection to self, connection to others, connection to nature. So for me, the impact is all about connection, right? Which so that's a really good framework to kind of start off with your why, is to contribution, so that impact. And essentially that is the process that I take my clients through. And oftentimes the biggest aha moment happens at the end of the session, where I'm asking all these questions about their life. Okay, so why did you feel that way? What about that specific story? Out of all the stories that you could have told me, what about that specific story stands out to you? Why do you think you reacted in that way? I'm asking all these questions that feel seemingly irrelevant. And at the end of the session, I'm like, okay, so out of all the stories that you're telling me, there's a few themes that are reoccurring. It seems to me that you're really passionate about finding hidden gold, hidden gems, hidden talents, right? And that's your biggest kind of contribution. And so that and the biggest impact that you seem to be kind of passionate about making out of that is that we unleash potential, right? We unleash each individual's potential to the max. So again, this is an imaginary scenario, but you could imagine someone with a why like that being running a recruitment company, for example. So even though what he's selling is recruitment, the feeling they're selling is finding gems and unleashing potential. Companies want that will hire the recruiter. The candidates want that will be engaging with the recruiter. They're like, I'm a gem, I'm a hidden gem, find me. So when you can sell this feeling, you automatically dissociate yourself from being a commodity, and you become an ambassador for the life that your client wants to live. Basically, you become an enabler of the life that your client wants to live, rather than you're a recruiter, which one's cheaper, which one has a better rate, like what's your time. If you don't sell a feeling, the conversation will automatically go to the logistics, and then you'll start talking about nitty-gritty shit that you just really don't want to talk about. Like if you start talking about the details of pricing and stuff before you've even got to the meat of what you're saying, that's a really good indicator that you really need to focus on selling a feeling first. The talk about the logistics and the pricing should be much later in the conversation, once you're once you've got them excited emotionally.
And we keep coming back to this idea of selling a feeling, and I must admit that's gonna echo in my mind for a while. That really resonates with me a great deal, and I want to make sure I've got your little framework right. So the framework is I blank to blank for blank. Do I have say your little model again, your little framework again?
Yeah. To blank, so that blank.
Okay.
And the first blank is your contribution. What is the contribution that you just
like in my case,
in your life?
So in my case, it might be something like I run sales training workshops for sales engineers, so that, and then I have to be able to fill in the so that is that's the model, right?
No, right. So running sales training workshops for sales engineers is the commodity that you sell, right? So that's in your why statement. We're not talking about the commodity that you sell. We're talking about feelings, right? So yours would be, and having not
okay.
done your session for a while. So it would be yours would be something along the lines of, to help people make quick, impactful, pivotal changes so that they can influence people, or that's so that, you know, that's a bit that you kind of would need to have a bit more of a think about, like what is the feeling, the impact feeling that you're having. So, you know, to help people make pivotal changes so that we you can influence people to lives. That would be, for example, a version of your why. How do you live in line with that why? By selling sales trainings.
Yeah. So by the way, folks, thanks for, you know, tuning in while I'm here getting a free coaching session from Alara. So this is fantastic. So Alara, let's take this a step further. How does this then further transition into messaging for organizations and for individuals, and how does this dovetail into storytelling?
Yes, perfect. So for those of you that weren't here at the very start, one of the things I was mentioning is good messaging has 3 elements. The first is the emotional connection, the strong emotional pull, which is what we've been talking about just now, is the why, you know, being able to sell a feeling, which is your fundamental emotional drivers that drive you to do your business as well. The second element is creating this unmistakable clarity, like this impossible to misunderstand clarity. So how do you do that, right? So and just to give you the third element is the storytelling. So emotions, clarity, storytelling. So I want to talk about these kind of two, the clarity and the storytelling in parallel, because they kind of overlap a little bit. There's a lot of content out there about storytelling, you know, especially in business, in the professional world, kind of we should tell stories, more stories, influence people, blah, 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 blah. Great, perfect. I love that direction that we're going in. But in order to tell a story, you need to know the chapters of your story, right? So, you know, a great story starts off by, first of all, selling some sort of a question mark or a transformation. It ignites curiosity just from the get-go, right? So that could be in a sales deck, that might be something like, you know, some sort of a curiosity igniting question, or it might be kind of some shocking statistic. So or on a website, it might be kind of a transformational headline that gets people excited about, how do I get more of that, you know, that transformational headline that sells a feeling, like we were talking about, right? So a great story starts off with some sort of making people hungry for more. Then it will go into creating this sense of empathy. We get your pain. We not just like, are you feeling are you feeling tired and grumpy? You know, not just kind of asking questions, but showing we truly understand, not just kind of the symptoms of what you're feeling, but how that's deeply affecting you. To articulate that creates a really strong sense of, these people get me, and therefore I respect them to listen more to what they have to say. So yeah, great story. Ignite the curiosity, then empathize with their pain. Then once you've created that sense of empathy, you can go into you've now got credibility and respect to educate them on what's causing their pain, right? So I understand deeply what the emotional stakes at play here. Now I want you to listen to me, because this is what's really happening. This is what's really causing your pain. Some people are aware of what the problem is, what the problem really is. Some people just know their symptoms. They're like, my tooth aches, but they don't know that actually they have a cavity, right? So when you go to the dentist, you trust them enough. When they say that this is what's causing your toothache, you trust them that that's what's causing your toothache, right? So you educate them on what's causing their toothache, and then you say, I've helped people with this problem before. You introduce yourself as the guide, right? You introduce yourself as not the hero, like, oh, we're amazing, we've won all these awards, but we've helped people with this problem before. And then you go into this is the key value pillars that people have got out of working with us. Not here's what we sell, here's all the details of how it works. These are the key areas the biggest aha moments or kind of the biggest points of value that people have got out of working with us. This is different to kind of big picture end result benefits. I'm not talking about kind of like, and because of working with us, they were able to grow their business and, you know, get more clients, higher conversions. That's kind of a little bit too big picture. You want to be zoomed in enough so that they're like, it's related to their specific pain. Because if you go too big picture, like, you know, grow your business, stuff like that, people just kind of say like, yeah, okay, I've heard that before. Like it goes into the confusing box, right? Which is why I'm going to be talking about the clarity and the story in parallel, because in a moment I'm going to talk about how do you actually get clarity about that. But yeah, so once you've introduced yourself as a guide, you say, here's the areas of value that people got out of working with us. And then you say, here is the box that helps you get that value. Then you talk about what's in the box. What is the physical, tangible thing you're selling? Is it coaching? Are you selling ads? Are you selling recruiting? Are you like, so then list like what is the physical, tangible things that you're selling. Just a quick tip there though, it is handy to be clear up front. You don't have to go too much into detail, but you know, if it's a website, you want to have a subheadline just kind of talking about what's in the box. Like people want to be able to quickly come onto a website and say, oh, you're a recruiter. Okay, like they want to know what label to put on you. Otherwise you might miss your chance and they'll just be like, transformation sounds great, but I have no clarity as to like what area, like what box you fit into. Like as far as I know, you could be a life coach or a recruiter, right? So just be, it is clear. It is important being, you know, just mentioning, not in too much detail, but just mentioning what box do you fit into, what label do you fit under. But really, when you only talk about it in detail, once you've got them, once you've solved the transformation, once you've got them, create this sense of empathy with the pain, created a sense of credibility by educating them on the pain and the consequences if they don't do anything about it, introducing yourself as the guide, selling the value pillars, and then talking about what's in the box. And then you can talk about kind of how that works and the process that your clients go through, why you're different, and then depending on the context, kind of there's different chapters that you can go through. But so that is the flow that you want to go through when telling a story. And it's, you know, I'm not the first one to kind of talk about this flow. There's lots of different versions of this flow kind of through storytelling experts. But the place where it gets tricky is you're like, okay, great, I'm going to talk about the pain and the problems and the value pillars. And then you get to the value pillars and then you start talking about, we're going to grow your business, you know, and we're going to make more conversions, right? It feels like every time you go on to the next chapter, you're kind of trying to untangle what you're saying. So this is why it's really important to be clear on what are the chapters that make up my story before I even try to tell a story. What are the different elements of my story? So I call this your core message map, basically. So this is when I work with clients, I create this visual. It's a map, right? It has lots of different boxes, and each box represents a different chapter of your story. So you have four main boxes. You have your why, right? Your why is the feeling you're selling. That's one. So just write that down in one box. The second big box you have is your who, right? When it comes to your who, we're talking about what industry are they in? What is the what stage are they at, if it's applicable? Who is the human that you're selling to? You know, yes, you got the business you're selling, but who's the human that you're selling to? And then what is the emotions, the pains that they feel versus the problems that's causing their pains versus the consequences of what will happen if they don't do anything about their pain, right? So if you're watching a replay of this, just pause that and make a note of those, because you might want to go back to them afterwards. But that's kind of, you know, those are all the different chapters of your who, right? There's all writing an avatar, like a 2-page long avatar paragraph is great, but it's a big chunk of text, right? So the idea with separating your message into your different chapters is that it's no bullshit, no fluff. Like, this is the fundamentals of what we're trying to say here. Here's their pain, here's their problem, here's their consequences if they don't do anything about it. Here's the human that I'm selling to. They're in this organization, and this is the industry that this is the type of organization they are, and this is the type of industry that they're in. Having your, so that's just one of the boxes, right? The who, and then you got your box of credibility. Like, what are some testimonials that you can pull on? What are some credibility statements that you can pull on, like we won this award, or kind of sometimes you have the like author of a best-selling book, for example. What are some credibility inducing statements that could be really handy for you to pull on? And also, what are some case studies? Not just kind of, I'm not talking about a page-long case study. I'm talking about a transformation. Before me, they were like, this was the results they got. After us, this is the results they got. What are some numbers that you can about transformations that you have already created that you can kind of pull on quite quickly, right? So that's kind of your credibility box. You got your why, you got your who, you got your credibility box, and the last big box, which is arguably the one with the most sub-chapters in it, is your what you do, right? The actual what are we selling here? Now, there's so many different angles of looking at what you do, and this is why I think it's very easy to struggle with it and kind of get confused about which angle am I selling now. So it's really handy to just separate them so that you can be intentional about, right now, I'm trying to sell a feeling, and therefore I'm going to use this box. Right now, I'm trying to get them to logically come on board, so I'm going to sell them this box, right? So the different boxes that are in your what bigger box, right? So one is the transformation that you're selling, right? What is the bigger picture? And this is very closely related to your why, right? So if your why is to help people have aha moments, or kind of make pivotal changes so that they can go on to influence others to live a better life, your transformation might be is basically a context specific. So in the case of your business, Chris, it might be something along the lines of never struggle with sales again, right? So what is the bigger, the place that you're taking them to versus the place they are at now? And you can really get creative with this. Usually these transformation statements come to you in the shower, or kind of when you're on a walk. Like it's very rare. It really very rarely comes while you're just kind of sitting at your computer. Okay, let me fill out this bit of my core message map. But it's arguably one of the most important parts of your message, because that's the part that gets people to pick their ears up. So yes, you got your transformation statement, you got your title. Like, what is the actual box that you fit into? As much as I don't like labels, people seem to like labels. They like it. It makes them feel organized when they're kind of evaluating whether or not they even want to listen to your talk, or whether or not they even want to read another sentence on your website. So what is the category that you are in? And this isn't an objective thing. This is actually a subjective thing. You can be strategic about what category you put yourself in. My work, it could be interpreted kind of in the copywriting category, but actually, like, if I put it in the copywriting category, it would just value it so much less. It could be in the positioning category, which is a lot more appropriate, and people perceive it as a lot more of a strategic thing. So that's kind of the area that I like to hang out in, the positioning category. But it's not exactly positioning, because positioning is a lot more kind of who are we selling to, what are we selling? It's more kind of it's more of an internal document rather than kind of actually external facing. So I said I'm in the positioning world, but positioning and messaging world, and I'm a messaging architect, right? So that's kind of the label that I go under. So you can be kind of intentional about what category or what title or what label you want to use. Just make sure that you're not inventing a brand new category just for the sake of it, because then it's kind of just avoiding people. It makes it really hard to differentiate or compare, or like, where do you fall into these in amongst these other kind of options that your audience might be considering. So try to avoid inventing brand new categories if possible.
It's hard to create a category. So Alara, I could let you run. I know when you get up, some momentum, I could let you run for an hour. But I'm gonna push the pause button just for a minute. I want to double click on a few things you said, because so we're gonna go back to the storytelling just for a minute, and because you gave us a really valuable outline for storytelling. And so I think the outline was open with some sort of question or something that drives curiosity. Actually, it reminds me of something that I like to talk about, which is a disruptive truth, right? Something that maybe doesn't sound, sort of, or doesn't make perfect sense, or, gets the person to sort of lean in. So question, curiosity, show some empathy. So now we're connecting.
Yeah.
Educate, inform, right? Now we're building credibility, and then position yourself as a guide. Now I'm actually someone who can help, and then demonstrate or present or establish value pillars, which I love the term that you're creating there. And then at the end, we talk about what's in the box. At the end, we talk about the product. So do I have sort of those 5 steps pretty well?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it doesn't necessarily, usually kind of the story continues depending on the context. So it's not necessarily the end, but yeah, that's the 5th step.
Yeah. I love that. And then you mentioned so that was storytelling, but then we also talked about clarity, and you gave us, quote, 4 boxes that we need to think about when defining the message for clarity. And those 4 boxes were the why, and we talked about that first, the who, and I think what you put in the who box was pains, problems, and impact or consequences. Did I get that right? That all goes in the who box, right? And then the 3rd box is credibility. So what are all the points of credibility that you can talk about? And then the 4th box was the what. That in essence, that's what you sell.
You nailed.
Am I paying attention? Am I taking good notes here?
You are paying attention. Absolutely.
All right. Good. I just want. And by the way, Zahir Ahmad is chiming in with a few comments, and he's right. This is the art of influence. Very, very well said, Zahir. Very nice to see you. I appreciate you chiming in. By the way, folks, if you're out there and care to say hello, please feel free to do so. We don't have eyes on you, so we're never really sure who's out there. And by all means, if you have any questions for Alara or myself, please feel free to ask. Alara, this is great. So we've talked a little bit about making that emotional connection and the importance of remembering that we're really selling a feeling. Number 1. Yes. You've talked about clarity and what we can do certainly as an organization to get clarity around those 4 boxes. And you've given us a nice little framework for storytelling. Let's shift just ever so slightly and talk a little bit more specifically about an individual working in, let's say, in a sales role. And when we're specifically in conversation with, let's say, prospects and customers, how do we take this work that we're doing sort of around sort of the messaging? How can we actually leverage that in individual conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I think is really kind of handy to have in your back pocket when it comes to these chapters is the transformation that we talked about. What is the bigger picture, that kind of like thing that makes people pick their ears up, and your value pillars, right? So what is the key areas of value that people get out of? So when someone asks you, let's say you're at a networking event, and maybe it might be helpful for you to give me some scenarios, and then then I can kind of speak a little bit more specifically to each scenario. But let's say it's a networking event. Someone asks you what you do. You say, I help people get this transformation through these ABC value pillars. 3 is a magic number. Through this, and just say your service, your category, your title, but through recruiting, right? Great. Less than 30 seconds pitch. If you're in a longer interaction, for example, in a sales call, for example, you might actually want to and I know this is kind of what you teach in alignment with what you teach, is kind of start off by really untangling and asking them questions. You don't even need to you don't even need to predict what their pains are, because you can directly ask them. You have the person in front of you. You can ask them about their pains. You can ask them about what they think is causing their pains. You can ask them about what they've done so far. You can ask them about how is that actually affecting their business? How is it impacting their business, or kind of whatever, not necessarily their business, their department, and also you can ask them, how is it affecting them personally? Like, what is the emotional stakes that are at play here? And it just means that when you do get to the part of your pitch where the storytelling part, which is the flow that you beautifully summarized there, you can just customize each of those sections rather than kind of saying a generic pain that to empathize with. You can describe the pain back to them that you've heard from them, and they're like, you've really been listening, haven't you? You really heard me. Like they feel heard. You might want to educate them on the problem, whether if they nailed it, you can say that's exactly what's happening, maybe give a little bit more detail. If they don't know what's causing it, you might want to educate them on, why are you going through this pain that you just described to me. And yeah, the thing about the consequence is, if you tell people, if you go down this path, this is what's going to happen, people can get a little bit defensive. So the ideal scenario is get them to admit it initially through your series of questions beforehand. So if you don't do anything, why do anything about this? Like, if you don't do anything about it, what will happen? Why not just continue as you were is a really great question, because it's essentially saying, what is the consequence of not doing something? Why can't you just stay where you are? Like, it sounds like you've been bumbling along just fine up till now. Like, why can't you just stay where you are? Magic question, because they admit to their the consequence that will happen if they don't do anything about it, and then you can reflect that back to them in the part where you go into your pitch, where you go into your story. So I would say start off with questions where you basically collect the information that you need for your story, and then customize that story flow that we have to that individual. And it makes, so you still have the same flow, and the part where you're talking about your business or your product is still kind of more or less the same. The value pillars don't change, but it just means the entire story is so much more delicious to the audience, because they know that this is a custom conversation, and it works wonders, rather than just kind of like slamming a standard sales deck into their face.
So again, I mean, you've said so many things that I want to sort of double click on. I'm inspired to share an observation of a word that you have used a couple of times, because I think it's such an impactful word, and that word is untangled. And I think the more we recognize that everybody we deal with, it's their problems are not a linear sort of problem space, right? And everything is complicated, and particularly because it always involves people, right? So I think the more we approach a conversation with this notion of, let's see if we can help untangle this a little bit. And it brings me to another thought, which is, I think, another part, one of the things that we're talking about is messaging in such a way that's impossible to confuse and irresistible to act on. And I think not only do we need to do these things that you're talking about, right, which is build that emotional connection, work and strive for clarity and leverage storytelling, we need to be very intentional with our words. And Alara, I'm inspired to ask you, how much time do you spend really thinking through the specific words that you use? And is this something that you talk to clients about as well?
Right. So you touched on a really good point there. There is a difference between the fundamental thing you're trying to say and the way you say it. So I almost kind of make a comparison, like the song that, let's say, you're at a concert, the song that the artist is singing, the singer is singing, versus the performance that he's giving, how he engages the audience, how he makes it exciting for that specific audience at that live show right there. That's the difference between messaging and, what you're referring to, the individual words, is basically the copywriting. So strictly speaking, the exact words that you're using is a secondary consideration. First, I would rather you just know what you're fundamentally trying to say in a really clean, clean and create and fundamentally knowing the feeling that you're trying to communicate. And then it organically moves on to, okay, so what is the best words that I can use that will communicate this feeling most impactfully? What is the best words that I can use that will communicate this concept, with a strong punch, right? So let's talk about that. It's not strictly within the realm of what I do with my clients, but it very much overlaps with it. And I often find myself kind of really finding what is the most impactful word that I can use here. So for example, impossible to misunderstand, irresistible to act on. We could say that same thing by saying, I help you create a clear message that gets people to take an action, gets people to do what you want them to do.
Yeah.
How inspiring is that? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Find your raw. Again, if as a standalone sentence, that doesn't necessarily communicate any clarity, but it communicates a feeling. So if you start off with find your raw, which is kind of a headline that I use quite often, and then back that up with create a message that's impossible to misunderstand, irresistible to act on, you got the emotional connection, you got the logical clarity. So one of the best ways to really find the most impactful words is to play around with them and allow yourself to experiment and fail. You really need a child mentality for this, this playful, unafraid of failing mentality. If you go into it with, we're having a strategic business meeting right now, we need to have a think about what the best words to use are. It is not a conducive environment for that creativity to flow. It's a very creative process to come up with those words that really, really pack a punch. And oftentimes it is usually out of the business environment where those moments come. So like I said, just create some time for play and fun, regardless of whether you're working on your messaging, but it is great for messaging when it comes to these kind of finding punchy words or kind of finding exciting ways of saying stuff. It usually comes up when fundamentally what you're trying to say. The message is there. That kind of being in a fun mindset, in this creative, light-hearted mindset, really helps with kind of finding the best words to use. And then the second thing I would say is experiment with them, test it on people. So if you're just in conversations, you can just throw a sentence out there, see what the reaction is. The find your raw thing. My program has been called Find Your Raw for quite some time now, but I never really used it. I never really kind of put it to the front of my message until recently. And since I have, it's being, you used it as the description of this program. So I've actually had someone message me saying, I love the name of your program. Clients refer to my program as the Find Your Raw program now. So it kind of is partly about experimenting, getting feedback, kind of seeing how people react to it, but partly about owning it and sticking to it. If you just put it out there once, it might land with someone, but you're never going to know really if it's making the impact that you want it to make. So once you kind of find a few catchy sentences, make that your kind of call to your war cry, if that makes sense, and stick to
it makes a great deal of sense. And again, I mean, there's so many things that I'd love to double click on, but just this notion of be a little bit playful. You use the term childlike, and that can have a negative connotation to some people, but in this context, I think it has a very positive connotation, right? I mean, kids just, they prefer to have a little bit of fun.
Yes.
And particularly anybody out there who's sort of in the direct line of work of the people that I work with, which is we give a lot of presentations, we give a lot of demonstrations. There's a way to deliver the message and do so in a rather entertaining and engaging manner and still get the message across, right? And that's really, and impossible to misunderstand is a perfect example, right? It's one thing to say, speak in a way that's clear and understandable, right? But to say impossible to misunderstand, it conjures a different image. And that's really what we need to be striving for whenever we're communicating, is to activate the emotional fibers as I like to say. So, by the way, Alara, we're nearing the end of our time, which is a shame because I know I could let you run for another hour. I do just want to say hello to a few other people. Louise, says a masterclass in messaging. Louise, thanks for your comment. I hope you're still with us. Michelle asked me if I ever published my notes. Great question, Michelle. I think I may have to, and I do take notes in every one of these conversations. I think I learn more than anybody else who learns. So I may publish some of these notes. And Zahir says, this is sales psychology. You're 100% correct. This is definitely a little bit on sales psychology. There's a few other things that you mentioned that I just want to touch on. You mentioned the emotional stakes. Right. And what's not only what's in it for the organization when we're speaking to clients, but what's in it for people on a personal level, right? On an individual level, what are their emotional stakes? And I loved your question about, why not continue doing what you're doing? Right? Like, why make any change? Particularly if you sense that maybe they're reluctant, and sometimes we're talking to clients that almost are a little bit reluctant to acknowledge or admit that there's a problem.
Yeah.
And they, but if you say, well, why do anything? By the way, I think Brian's signing off. He's probably got a meeting to go to. I can't believe it, but we're already at the top of the hour here. So we may need to wrap this up here in a minute. But such great ideas and thoughts, Alara. So as we're sort of circling the runway here and the landing gear is out, I think we're going to have to land this plane here in just a minute. Alara, any sort of capstone thoughts on this idea of messaging, storytelling, and speaking with clarity, speaking in such a way and crafting messages in such a way that are impossible to misunderstand and irresistible to act on.
Yeah. So what I would say is it's very easy to listen to something like this and feel like, well, I have a lot of work to do. It's very easy to bash what you've already got. And I think the biggest asset that you have when influencing someone to act is, I love how Tony Robbins puts it, is when you're selling, you're transferring emotion. The emotion that you have, you're transferring that to them. So if you didn't take anything else away from this conversation, I just want you to take away that fire that you have inside of you. Sometimes it fluctuates. I'm not saying we all feel it every day, but work on feeding that fire. Work on, if you're feeling disconnected from it, find a way of connecting back to it. Or if you're really not connected to it in the work that you're doing, maybe you need to find a new line of work where you connect back to it. But that fire that you have when you show up to work, when you show up to a call, is fundamentally what you're selling. Everything we talked about in this call is how to transfer that fire, how to really transfer that emotion of excitement, that passion, onto someone else, right? So we talked about techniques of how to do that, but just remember that the real value in your messaging is not the techniques of how to do it, what we've talked about today, but is fundamentally the fire that you have inside of you. So feed it, find it, and if you do nothing else, even if you have no techniques in your back pocket, focus on transferring that, and you will be a lot ahead of anyone else that's selling out there. And these techniques will hopefully help you do that and transfer that fire inside of you, get that emotion across more effectively, and influence someone to take an action that you believe is going to better their life.
Such a powerful message, Alara. And, I have to be honest, I think there's probably nobody who needed to hear this message and this great reminder more than I did. So I actually appreciate your words a great deal. And I'm inclined to share one final thought as well. And that is, I think the way that translates into anybody who may be in the role of a sales engineer, responsible for presenting and demonstrating a solution, going back to that fire, there is some reason that every one of us in this role decided to go to work for the company that we're working for. And there's some reason that there was something about the solution that we were impressed with that inspired us enough to want to work with and or sell that solution. And what I hear you saying is that we need to reconnect to that fire and recognize that it's the reason we were sold, quote unquote, is the same reason others may very well be sold and or become
Absolutely.
convinced. And so we need to connect with that quote fire. So I absolutely love that. Alara Vural, you can find her on LinkedIn, of course. Where can they get to your website, Alara?
So alaravural.com, very simple. I'm just going to put it on my computer before it dies. I don't want to last minute. alaravural.com, and what I've recently launched a little mini course that actually walks you through exactly how to do what we talked about today. So you'll find that on the website as well. There's a mini course tab. So feel free to check that out. And it'll just, rather than taking copious notes from this call, it'll just walk you through step by step through everything we spoke about. And
there you have it. By the way, Jason, and I'm not going to try your last name. Thank you for rocking and roaring. That's very well said, Jason. So there you have it, folks. AlaraVural.com. She's got a mini course that you can sign up for. And as always, if you like these sessions, please, I encourage you to go to #TechSalesAdvice and follow along. We try to do these every Monday at about this time. Alara, it has been far too long. It was absolutely great to have you back on the show. Your energy and your insights are just fantastic. So good to see you again. We will have you back next year. And in the meantime, I wish you the best. Be well, folks. For those of you who hung around, thanks so much. Alara, stick around just for a second. I'll give you your parting gift. To everyone else, have a good week, folks. We'll see you next week. Cheers all. Bye-bye.